Under the moonlight, voices from the past call out to you. Subscribe so you don't miss the rest of the story. You let your mind drift, the day's noise falling away as you imagine another time. One where the air was thick with incense, the walls whispered in paper, and every step you took was a performance. Tonight, we wander into the hidden chambers of feudal Japan, where the life of a concubine was a careful blend of artistry, discipline, and quiet survival. Picture this. From the tilt of your head to the way you draw in a breath, every motion is calculated to enchant a man who holds your future in his hand. Before we begin, settle in. Dim the lights, maybe let a soft hum fill the room, something to blur the edges of thought. And tell me in the comments where in the world you're listening from and what hour the night finds you. It's always remarkable to see how far these stories travel, linking strangers across oceans. Dawn arrives not with clamor, but with a gentle seep of pale light through rice paper doors, brushing over the quiet shape of your body still on the futon. There are no roosters here, only the faint shuffle of servants entering as if the floor might betray their judgment. You stay perfectly still, not because you slept well, but because to rise too soon would break the illusion of mystery you've spent years perfecting. The truth? Your back aches, your hair has taken on an unfortunate shape, and your dreams were peculiar. But none of that belongs here. This is the first act of the day's theater, and you are both the central figure and the silent ornament. A warm basin is set before you, a wordless invitation to wash away the night. Hands work gently at your skin and hair, not out of affection, but because in this place, appearing flawless is a form of survival. The brush moves through your hair with careful rhythm, smoothing away any sign of sleep, because no one dares show up before a daimyo with a hair out of place. You keep your face serene, your thoughts unreadable. Behind the sliding screens, the muffled laughter of the daimyo drifts in, either a blessing or a warning, depending on his mood. You make a quiet note to avoid crossing paths with his favored companion until the morning tea is poured. You rise from the bedding like a crane lifting from still water, the fabric of your robes waiting in careful layers nearby. The incense curls in the air, the performance has begun. Your shoulders ease back as you repeat the silent phrase every woman in such halls has whispered to herself. Here we go again. The face painting begins, what you might call makeup, but here it's more an erasure. The first layer, rice powder, pressed into the skin until every trace of warmth is gone. In its time, some powders carried enough lead to be more dangerous than beautiful, yet still they were used. Your skin becomes a pale mask, stretching from face to chest, for even a hint of natural tone would break the spell. Your eyebrows are painted over, then redrawn high and fine, creating an expression of constant surprise, considered elegant in its own strange way. The lips are marked only in the center, a small red bloom meant to appear demure but more often looking as if you'd tasted a single berry and thought better of it. And then the most startling touch, teeth blackening. A lacquer made of iron powder stains them deep, a sign of loyalty to one man, though in truth it's more a barrier between you and a smile. Through it all, you remain motionless. Questions are useless here. Tradition answers before you ask, and the answer is always because it has been done for centuries. Now comes the dressing, a ritual as much about status as it is about clothing. First, the soft cotton underlayers, a thin promise of comfort in the summer heat. Then the inner robes, their colors chosen not at whim but with meaning. A wrong pairing could speak out of turn on your behalf. Deep red over pale green whispers of refinement and hidden depth. White over gold warns others to keep their distance. Every layer, every fold, is another line in the unspoken story you carry into the day. And so, by the time the morning fully claims the room, you are no longer simply a woman rising from sleep. You are a living emblem of elegance and intrigue, poised to play your part in a world where beauty is both your shield and your cage. You feel the weight of the morning settle over you like silk layered on silk, each fold a signal, each thread a quiet reminder that beauty here is both armor and obligation. The outer kimono waits, heavier and glossier than the robes beneath, its sheen catching the faint light like water on lacquer. Its long, trailing sleeves seem almost ceremonial, yet you can't help but notice they could, in theory, conceal far less delicate intentions. No one stands too close during the stage of preparation. Elegance, after all, has its own unspoken boundaries. And then comes the obi, the broad sash that pulls the entire ensemble together while steadily testing the limits of your spine. It's cinched until your breathing becomes a measured, shallow thing, your ribcage trained to expand only in whispers. In this world, a well-tied obi doesn't just hold fabric in place. It speaks without sound, telling onlookers of refinement, poise, and the quiet endurance of someone one deep breath away from undoing the day's entire illusion. You don't dress yourself. That's not your role. Two attendants move around you with practiced precision, folding, tucking, and adjusting as though sculpting you into a living piece of art. They don't waste words, only the occasional quiet grunt when a seam resists. You've learned their language by now. That sound means lift your arms, turn your shoulder, hold still. By the time they finish, the sensation has left your ribs entirely, but in its place is an image of such composed magnificence that even the most elaborate screen paintings might seem plain beside you. This is not a special occasion. It's simply the daily costume. Whether you're to sit in a garden or cross a threshold into more private chambers, you must appear as though a portrait could be painted of you at any moment. Breakfast comes next, but here it's more ritual than meal, an exercise in control as much as nourishment. You kneel on the cushion, legs folded beneath you, the posture itself an act of quiet endurance. A tray is placed with exact precision. A small bowl of rice, a delicate strip of grilled fish, 3 carefully arranged pickled vegetables, and a modest miso soup that seems to observe you as much as you it. The portions are not meant to fill you, they are meant to keep you light, almost untethered, the way romantic ideals have long imagined beauty should be. Your task is to eat just enough to remain steady on your feet, but not so much that it betrays appetite. Every movement is restrained. No slurping, no sighs of satisfaction, and certainly no grimaces when the tartness of a pickled plum catches you off guard. The sleeves of your kimono hang like ornamental clouds, and each bite requires a delicate dance to keep them from trailing through the soup. You learn small tricks, tucking the fabric under your forearm, leaning ever so slightly, hoping gravity will be merciful. The attendants watch quietly from the edges of the room. They won't comment now, but later, somewhere else, every detail will be remembered: how you held your chopsticks, whether you missed a grain of rice, the angle of your bow when the tray is cleared. You finish, lowering your utensils with the reverence given to sacred objects. Was it satisfying? Not in the way a full meal is. But there's a strange lightness in it, a clarity that might be hunger or might simply be the obi reminding you of its presence. Now comes the part of the day that defines this life: waiting. Not the restless, impatient waiting of merchants or soldiers, but the poised and deliberate waiting of someone who knows that stillness can be its own form of power. You cannot wander the estate, that freedom belongs to others. Instead, you remain in a chosen space, a room framed by painted screens, a small bonsai in the corner, a view of a koi pond that has seen more seasons than conversations. You wait in a way that suggests you are not waiting at all. Every so often, you shift your posture, not to relieve the ache in your knees, but to give the impression of deep contemplation, as though pondering the impermanence of plum blossoms. You cannot appear eager, for eagerness speaks of weakness. The summons may come in minutes or in hours. Perhaps the daimyo is speaking with another, or immersed in poetry, or resting in his chamber. You'll know only when someone chooses to tell you. To pass the time, you might compose a short poem, melancholic, layered in suggestion, never so plain that its subject can be easily guessed. Or you might let your fingers drift over the strings of a shamisen, careful that the melody is subdued, its beauty veiled in restraint. Others are waiting too, some visible, others just beyond earshot. This is its own quiet game, a contest of stillness and subtlety. Who adjusts her robe with the most grace? Who holds her gaze steady when the messenger passes? Who looks as though she has already been chosen? In this silent theater, every breath, every glance, every fold of silk is a move on the board. And you, whether you feel it or not, are always playing. You know the game by now. The glances, the subtle shifts in posture, the small details like whether your obi sits precisely centered or just slightly off, as if by accident. The hardest part is pretending you're not waiting for a summons at all, even though the truth is it hovers in your mind like a paper lantern in the dark. You master the art of looking content, as though your worth isn't tethered to the possibility of being chosen tonight, while inside you measure every moment by that chance. A sigh escapes, not weary but artful, and your gaze drifts towards something deliberately poetic, the slow descent of a leaf or a koi circling in its pond with the same languid patience you've trained yourself to wear. If the morning belongs to preparation, the afternoon belongs to positioning, not the physical kind, but the quiet strategy of court life dressed in silks that whisper when you move. By this hour, the other concubines have gathered, each a painted mask of grace. You greet them with shallow bows, your smiles warm enough to pass as friendly but sharp enough to leave a mark. This is not sisterhood. This is a courtly chess match where every word is a move and every glance can be a blade. The conversations are light, almost trivial, by design. Yet beneath them lies an undercurrent of meaning. Lady Aiko's calligraphy has improved, really means she once wrote like a drunken novice. The daimyo seemed at peace this morning, is a reminder that he didn't choose you. And the most elegant of all, you look radiant today, is a dagger wrapped in silk, its true translation closer to, you seem less exhausted than usual. Here, compliments are carefully crafted weapons, and the sharper the smile, the deeper the cut. A remark about someone's kimono being bravely modern can plant seeds of doubt that bloom into days of self-questioning. You glide through this, nodding at the right moments, letting your head tilt in interest, even feigning admiration for a haiku you're certain was copied from a screen painting. Then the shift happens, someone mentions the daimyo. Perhaps he was seen by the pond, perhaps lingering near a fan that another left behind. The room stills, but in a way that pretends it hasn't. Inside hearts race. This is when the role deepens. You must be interested but not eager, confident but not certain, available but not desperate. It is like becoming a rare delicacy, admired but approached with caution. Through it all, your voice stays soft, your posture exact, your words wrapped in layers of courtesy. Here, status isn't seized by force. It's earned in whispers and the small victories of leaving another woman unsure about her choice of sleeve, poem, or scent. You may not yet be summoned, but hope remains, steady and quiet beneath the surface, hidden beneath 12 layers of fabric. When the sun begins its slow descent, you prepare for the possibility. The bath is not required, but everyone knows it is essential. You do not risk carrying the scent of anxiety or pickled radish into a private chamber. The bathhouse air is warm and damp, perfumed faintly with yuzu peels. Your attendants untie the endless knots, free you from folds and sashes until the armor of silk falls away. For a brief, weightless moment, you are not a symbol or a strategy, you are simply yourself, a woman lowering into steaming water, wondering idly if your legs are as smooth as they should be for a man whose vision may be as selective as his affections. You cleanse with care, never too roughly. The goal is freshness, not frenzy. A light scent follows, subtle enough to intrigue without announcing itself. Your hair is oiled, your skin dusted. Even the soles of your feet are inspected, because in this world, perfection runs from the top of your head to the smallest heel. And still, you may never be called. You may return to your quarters and repeat the day's powdering, sitting in practiced stillness while composing another ambiguous verse about ducks and longing. But if the summons comes, you will not be caught unprepared. This readiness, soft, deliberate, and veiled in incense, is part of the unspoken art of survival here. It does not come with trumpets. No scroll is unfurled, no ceremonial gong rings out. The moment arrives as the most dangerous ones often do, in a whisper. A quiet knock, the rustle of silk, and a bowed messenger waiting just beyond the screen. You hear it, the quietest of knocks, the soft bow of a messenger, and the single measured phrase, "His Lordship requests your presence." In truth, it means only one thing: you've been chosen. Alongside that truth comes the unspoken countdown. 20 minutes to reapply your mask of serenity, refresh the silk, and steady the storm in your mind. You keep your face smooth, neither smug nor pale, though your thoughts race. Perhaps it's favor. Perhaps you are simply the stand-in for another whose charm has worn thin today. Either way, the stage awaits, and tonight, you step into its light. Your attendants move with speed and precision, adding a fresh dusting of white powder to erase the fatigue that even stillness can bring. A touch of rouge to the cheeks, just enough to suggest life without revealing hunger, and the outer kimono is exchanged for the finest in your collection, deep, lustrous silk with cranes in flight stitched in gold. In this court, symbolic birds are not decoration. They are a promise that you are worthy of slow admiration. The hair, already flawless, is inspected and adjusted, a comb chosen for restraint rather than flash. A final dab of yuzu oil behind the ears, and you smell like composure wrapped in citrus and ambition. The walk to his private chambers is deliberate. You do not rush. Rushing is eagerness. Your steps are even, the weight of each balanced like a river's flow, steady and calm. Behind you, the eyes of rival concubines follow. They will not speak, but their silence is loud enough to fill the corridor. At the threshold, the screen slides open. You bow, low and fluid, rising with that faint smile you've practiced, warm but unreadable. Whether he greets you or not, you are already in character. Muse, comfort, diversion. The role is understood without ever being named. Despite the whispers beyond these walls, the evening does not begin with hurried intimacy. It begins with ritual. You are seated across from him, not too near. Between you rests a lacquered table, a pot of warming sake, and the first exchange of glances that serve as the night's true invitation. He pours for you. You lift the cup with grace, sip slowly, and let the pause linger. Compliments follow. His robe, your hair, each an offering in the careful dance of flattery. Neither of you names the ending you both expect, because the performance is in pretending you do not know it. The conversation drifts like incense smoke, poetry, fragments of dreams, perhaps a familiar tale about a hawk he once saw, fierce and solitary. You've heard it before, but you listen as though it's new, because tonight your role is to be the attentive flame to his spoken ember. If music comes, it is soft, played by unseen hands. Your part is to hold the room's focus as though it were a delicate fan, open enough to intrigue, sharp enough to command care. The first touch is never rushed, a brush of fingers, a murmured remark about your scent. If he is feeling poetic, you might be likened to a blossom in winter. If less inspired, a simple "you look well tonight" will do. Either way, you accept it with a bow of the head, as if it were a verse from the mountain gods. When the formality dissolves, the table is set aside, the lanterns dim, and you follow him into the adjoining chamber. Here, there is no room for clumsy movements or visible eagerness. You enter as moonlight would, quiet, deliberate, and full of suggestion. Months of training guide every gesture. The bend of the wrist, the turn of the head, the way you breathe just enough to seem present without betraying too much. What follows is not romance. It is theater sanctioned by the walls of power. He is the Lord, and you are the flower that chose to open tonight. Every move is measured, every sound is shaped for effect. You respond as you were taught, with warmth that never crosses into hunger, with mystery that never hardens into distance. The poetry ended in the other room. Here, the language is silence and presence. When the moment ends, whether in triumph or in a slow fading of interest, you do not ask for meaning. You smile, rise, and bow with the same poise you arrived with. Because in this world, your worth is not in what was said or done, but in how flawlessly you leave the stage, ready for the next summons, whenever it comes. You rise from the futon slowly, smoothing the silk around you, careful to hide the tiny indentations left by hairpins and the faint cramps still lingering in your leg. You do not glance back, and you certainly do not ask for validation. This was never about romance. It was about position. And tonight you held it. For now. He sleeps sprawled across the bedding, the picture of conquest, though the truth is closer to a man who drifted into dreams moments after modest effort. You lie beside him, spine straight, mind whirring, not with sentiment, but with calculation. Did you tilt your head at just the right moment? Was that one soft breath too much? Did the gold thread in your kimono catch the lamplight the way you intended? These questions will never be voiced, but they unfurl in your mind like a general reviewing the battlefield. You know you cannot rise too soon, lest it seem cold. But linger too long, and you risk looking clingy. So you wait, watching the bamboo slats in the ceiling, counting them as if the number might give you an answer. Somewhere in the palace, the other women are awake. They always know. Summonings are sensed here the way wolves scent blood in the air. The silence is thick. Not oppressive, just full of things that will never be said, hopes that are carefully folded away, and the quiet gamble that perhaps tomorrow's breakfast will arrive with a slightly better cut of fish. If he murmurs something, a name, a compliment, you nod, even if he's already slipping back into a snore that suggests he has never once had to sleep with dignity packed into a tight sash. Eventually you rise. The exit after such an evening is an art in itself. You gather your robe, secure your obi, and smooth your hair just enough to suggest mystery rather than effort. The corridor is empty, yet you walk as if the entire court is watching. Because here, they always are. Your quarters are warm when you return, a lamp already lit, tea waiting. You drink without tasting, sitting in the stillness until your breath comes easier. You don't know if tonight will matter tomorrow, or if you'll be remembered at all. But you do know this. For a brief span of hours, you were chosen. And in this world, that is a kind of currency, one that can vanish by morning. Dawn comes quickly. You wake not because you're rested, but because no concubine dares sleep in. That privilege belongs to wives, to favored men, or to creatures in myth who have no rivals. The futon feels smaller than it did last night, or perhaps you are simply more aware of how little space you truly occupy in the grand architecture of the palace. Your attendants enter, eyes lowered, voices restrained. No one asks about last night, but the faint scent of incense clings to your skin, and your hair, though still immaculate, is just shy of its usual perfection. They begin again, powder, comb, fold, and secure, rebuilding the public mask that is nearly identical to yesterday's. The only difference is the fatigue woven into your bones, the kind that comes from holding grace like a blade all night long. The silence between you is almost companionable, though layered with the soft edge of judgment. A cough here, a remark there, perhaps about how Lady Ko received a rare silk comb this morning. You nod, reading the message beneath the words. The game resumes. You share nothing. Not the scent of plum wine that lingered on his breath, not the half-formed line of poetry he mumbled before sleep, not the way your mind now replays every exchange of eye contact, dissecting them as though they were political treaties. Instead, you return to your seat, the posture of serenity intact, and prepare for another day of subtle battles disguised as art, music, and polite conversation. You sip tea. You write the first half of a poem, then stop, leaving it deliciously incomplete. You watch a crane in the garden and wonder, not for the first time, what it would feel like to rise into the air wearing nothing heavier than a single layer of cloth. By now, word has traveled. In the palace, news does not need a voice. It drifts like perfume, slipping into every courtyard and corridor. Your name has already passed through several rooms before the morning meal is served. No one speaks it outright. Instead, they say things like, "How radiant she looks today," which everyone understands to mean she was summoned, and we are all pretending not to notice. This is the true craft of survival here, balancing emotion with calculation, intimacy with strategy, desire with unshakable silence. You smooth the sleeve of your kimono, inhale once, and exhale slowly. You are not the favorite this morning, but you are still in the game. And in this palace, stillness wrapped in silk can be sharper than any blade. You learn to hear them before you see them, those carefully placed phrases slipped into conversation like tiny blades hidden in silk. I wonder if his lordship prefers quiet poetry or livelier company these days. The translation is never about poetry. It's about you. It's about disbelief that you could have been chosen, wrapped in a compliment so delicate it could pass for grace to anyone not paying attention. You master the art of not reacting. No narrowing of the eyes, no hint of a smirk. Just that faint, knowing smile. The one a cat gives when it's certain it could catch the bird if it wanted to. In this world, to engage is dangerous, but to react is fatal. So you withdraw just enough. You take slower walks through the gardens, sit a little farther from the cluster of painted faces, pour yourself into calligraphy with such serene focus that no one can decide if you've reached a higher state of wisdom or if you're quietly plotting your next move. Either impression works in your favor. Because here, invisibility is a weapon sharper than any rumor. The women who talk too much are remembered. The ones who are remembered too often become targets. And envy in this palace is a dagger hidden in a sheath of compliments. When someone remarks that your robe is extravagant, you thank them as though they've blessed you, bow, and glide away before the sting can land. Your survival depends on timing, restraint, and the occasional glance that hints you could unravel someone standing if you cared enough to try. But power is fickle. Summons grow less frequent. A maid forgets your preferred incense one morning. Another day, your tea arrives lukewarm. It is not punishment, it is indifference, and that is worse. You are no longer tonight's question mark. That role belongs to someone else. Perhaps a newcomer, perhaps a rival who polished her charm just enough to catch the right eye at the right time. You handle it as you've been trained. No open complaint, no dramatic sulking. Just a slower bow, a smile that doesn't quite reach your eyes when someone marvels at Lady Hannah's youth. You agree, it is charming. You also know it will fade. The test now is not in being chosen, but in being replaced without crumbling. You can smile at your successor's hairpin while quietly counting the days until her own novelty wears thin. Falling from favor here is not a scandal, it is a tide turning. You are still in the palace, still painted into perfection, still playing the part, just in the shadows now. And shadows have their own advantages. You keep showing up to the gardens. You compose poems. You hold the teacup so steadily that anyone watching for a tremble will be disappointed. Of course you care. Not just for him, but for what the position brought. Influence, validation, a sliver of power in a place where women measure victory in glances and whispers. Losing that makes you feel smaller, as though you've been written into the background of your own story. But you know the truth, everything changes here. Favorites, fashions, fortunes. One misstep, one ill-timed verse, and the tide shifts again. So you wait, not with bitterness, but with patience. Because if favor can fade, it can also return. And when it does, you'll be ready. Time strips away more than the powder on your skin. Eventually, the performance thins, the pauses between words no longer calculated but natural. One day, in the privacy of your own chambers, you catch a glimpse of yourself without the silk and the staging. You recognize her. She's the woman who remembers every chapter. The first summons, the first carefully aimed compliment, the first time you knew you were no longer the favorite. You have played them all, muse, rival, mystery, shadow. You have smiled through rejection, written verses while quietly constructing your own survival. And what you carry now is not the echo of those moments, but the steel they left in you. A spine that outlasts any obi. A mind sharper than court gossip. And a legacy in the eyes of women who either envy you, fear you, or quietly wish to age half as gracefully. Here is the truth no one dares say aloud. In a palace built to worship youth, the most rebellious act is endurance. You no longer rush to the mirror when the messenger comes. You no longer wonder if the angle of a hairpin is perfect for seduction. Some mornings, you skip the full mask of powder and simply sit by the koi pond, watching the water ripple. Because sometimes the most honest thing you can do is let yourself exist without trying to look like a poem. You still wear silk, yes, but now you wear it for yourself. And in this place, that is its own kind of power. You see them, the newest arrivals, faces powdered to perfection, eyes bright with ambition, walking the same corridor you once claimed as your own. You smile, not out of cruelty, not out of kindness, but with the knowing calm of someone who has danced the entire dance and lived to tell it. You've played the game, moved like silk around power, spoken in whispers that could shift allegiances, and you are still here, quiet, composed, and dangerous in your silence. Because when the paint fades, when the titles shift, and when the spotlight moves on, you remain. And in a world like this, that is more than most ever achieve. The truth is, across history, the line between the sacred and the sensual has often been far thinner than we imagine. In ancient Babylon, that line didn't just blur, it vanished. At the heart of this truth were the soaring temples of Ishtar, goddess of love, fertility, and war. To the Babylonians, desire was not an offense against the gods, it was a bridge to them. Ritual intimacy wasn't hidden in shadows, it unfolded beneath the gaze of heaven. Ancient accounts, especially from those who traveled the region, speak of a remarkable tradition. Every woman, at least once in her life, would present herself at the temple of Ishtar, adorned in perfume and prayer, awaiting a stranger who would place a silver coin in her lap, the symbolic offering to the goddess. Refusing was not permitted. This was not a personal transaction but a sacred act, a physical gift offered for the well-being of the land and the balance of the cosmos. This was no ordinary marketplace of bodies. The temple was not a brothel, it was a stage where faith, desire, and cosmic order converged. Many of the women, known as the Nadu, were priestesses or daughters of high families. Cloaked in silk, their duties were not simply physical but profoundly spiritual. In their world, such unions were believed to stir fertility in the earth, to bless the rivers, and to ensure that life, human, animal, and crop, would flourish. It was a theology where the body was not shameful but divine, a living altar. And yet, even in Babylon, time shifted. Later rulers, whether moved by moral reform or political calculation, began to distance themselves from the practice. Still, for a brief, luminous moment in history, the temple walls of Ishtar stood as a testament to a time when the body was not a source of guilt, but a sacred vessel through which the world was kept in balance. If Babylon sanctified the act as cosmic duty, the ancient Greeks transformed it into something else entirely, a kind of theater where ecstasy became a doorway to the divine. At the center was Dionysus, god of wine, freedom, and the intoxicating collapse of boundaries. His followers gathered for the Dionysian mysteries, secret rites held far from the eyes of the uninitiated, in forests, sacred groves, and hidden sanctuaries. These gatherings weren't casual festivals. They required preparation, days of fasting, rhythmic dances, music that loosened the mind, and processions under the moon. Participants wore masks, animal skins, and sometimes nothing at all, not for scandal, but to shed the names and roles society had pressed upon them. For a few sacred hours, you were not merchant, servant, or noble. You were part of something raw, something older than city walls, a chorus of bodies and voices reaching toward the divine. Yes, outsiders whispered of chaos, of wild excess and unrestrained pleasure. But those who returned spoke of something far deeper, a transformation, a burning away of illusions. In those rites, sexual energy might be present, but it was symbolic, a reminder of life's cycles and the unity of all things. For the Greeks, these nights in the woods were not a rebellion against faith, but a release into it, a reminder that to be human was also to be wild. Not all approved. Philosophers like Plato warned that such passions could weaken discipline and lure citizens from reason. But for many, the mysteries offered something no temple or political forum could: emotional truth. In a society where daily life was rigidly ordered, they allowed for a safe unraveling, a temporary collapse of hierarchy where rich and poor, man and woman, stood on the same ground, if only for a night. And then there was Egypt. In that ancient kingdom, fertility wasn't a single aspect of life. It was the pulse of the entire civilization. No force embodied that more than the Nile. Each year its waters rose, flooding the banks and leaving behind a black silt so rich it could turn barren land into gold. The Egyptians saw this as more than nature's cycle. It was the sacred union of sky and earth, a marriage that sustained the world. To honor it, they held festivals that were anything but quiet. These celebrations were loud, colorful, and charged with symbolic energy. They blended music, dance, and ritual acts meant to mirror the fertility of the land. The message was clear: as the river brought life to the soil, so too should human connection bring life into the world. Across these ancient civilizations, one truth rises above the differences: human beings have always sought ways to weave the physical and the spiritual together. Whether in the scented halls of Babylon, the moonlit groves of Greece, or the riverbank festivals of Egypt, the body was never just flesh. It was a story, a prayer, a bridge between worlds. And those who understood that, whether priestess, initiate, or queen, left behind a legacy far more enduring than the rituals themselves. You stand at the edge of the crowd, the air thick with incense and drumbeats, watching as the god Min is honored. His image leaves little to the imagination, eternal, unapologetic, and unmistakably tied to fertility, agriculture, and raw masculine vitality. At his festival, the pharaoh himself steps forward to cut the first sheaf of grain, an offering not only to the god but to the cycle of life itself. Yet this is far more than a harvest ceremony. Dancers sway, some clothed in little more than beads, others bare in the sun, celebrating the beauty of the human form as an essential part of creation. The chanting rises, the rhythm of the drums aligns with the heartbeat, and the sacred and sensual intertwine until they are impossible to tell apart. Women play a vital role here, especially during the festival of drunkenness in honor of Hathor, goddess of love, joy, and music. This is no polite court gathering. It is a wild reenactment of a myth in which Hathor, in a haze of wine and delight, saved the world. By losing herself in intoxicated joy, she restored balance to the cosmos, and each year, the people follow her example. Wine flows, music echoes, hips move to ancient rhythms. In these moments, chaos is not feared, it is welcomed, because chaos, when channeled, becomes renewal. The Egyptians saw no shame in these undertones. Sexuality was not a sin to be hidden but a current running through all of life, as vital as the Nile's waters. Even in the temples devoted to healing, touch, and symbolic acts, sometimes intimate, were part of the sacred process. Fertility issues could be addressed not only with herbs and chants but through rituals guided by temple attendants who bridged the human and the divine. To the Egyptian mind, pleasure was not indulgence, it was harmony with the gods. Every kiss of the Nile's floodwaters was a reminder that existence itself was a sensual gift. And then there was Rome, a place where even the wildest impulses were given structure, woven into the civic calendar. Nowhere was this more visible than in Lupercalia, the February festival of fertility that turned the city into a living, breathing ritual. It began as a rustic rite for shepherd gods, but in time, it became one of the most unique public celebrations in Roman history, part purification, part revelry, part raw theater. The god Lupercus was honored here, tied to fertility and protection. His myth reached back to the very cave where Romulus and Remus were said to have been suckled by a she-wolf. This primal origin shaped the tone of the day, unashamed, physical, and steeped in symbolic rebirth. The Luperci, young men chosen for their vigor, ran through the streets wearing goat skins, or nothing at all, carrying strips of hide. Women would step forward eagerly to receive a playful strike from these whips, believing it would bless them with fertility, safe childbirth, and heightened vitality. It was chaotic, loud, and earthy, yet beneath the laughter and teasing was sacred intention. The lashes, the songs, the feasts, all were part of cleansing the city and shaking off winter's stagnation. In this way, Lupercalia bridged the human body with the turning of the seasons. Later poets wrote of it with both humor and longing, and while moralists tried to restrain its excesses, the festival endured for centuries, until a new faith reframed its meanings. Some historians even whisper that the embers of Lupercalia smolder beneath modern Valentine's Day, the goatskin rites transformed into paper hearts, yet still carrying that ancient link between love, renewal, and desire. If Lupercalia was a public release, the Eleusinian mysteries were the private heartbeat of Greek spirituality, hidden, solemn, and fiercely protected. Celebrated for over 1,000 years in the sanctuary of Eleusis, these rites centered on the myth of Demeter and Persephone, the mother who mourned and the daughter who returned from the underworld. The story carried the power of the seasons themselves, of life dying and being reborn. Unlike many Greek traditions, the mysteries were open to anyone, man or woman, rich or poor, so long as they kept the vow of silence. What happened inside the sanctuary was never written down. To speak of it was to risk your life. The rituals involved fasting, sacred processions, and secret offerings. Some scholars believe they also contained symbolic acts, perhaps sensual in nature, that mirrored themes of union, fertility, and transformation. To be initiated was to walk a path from darkness into light, from ignorance into revelation. Those who emerged often described a sense of renewal, of having touched something beyond mortality. Whatever took place in those nights, it was powerful enough to shape the souls of philosophers, farmers, and rulers alike. And perhaps that was the point. Whether through wine-soaked revelry or whispered ritual, the ancients understood that to touch the divine, you must first strip away the walls between body, spirit, and the turning of the earth. Across these cultures, Egyptian, Roman, Greek, the message hums beneath the centuries. The sacred and the sensual are not separate threads but a single woven cloth. To honor life, you must honor the forces that create it. And in doing so, you find that the most human acts can also be the most divine. You move with the crowd, the torches throwing long, wavering shadows as the air grows heavy with smoke and anticipation. The story guiding you to Eleusis is as old as breath itself. Persephone's abduction, her descent into the realm of the dead, her return to the light. To the ancients, it was not simply a tale, but a living pattern. Loss and return, death and rebirth, the turning of the seasons. And woven into that pattern, some scholars believe, was a hidden climax, a ritual union between the goddess and her divine consort, sealing the promise of renewal. Whether performed in body or enacted in pure symbolism, the moment was said to be overwhelming, stirring the heart, sharpening the mind, and touching the soul in ways few could put into words. The journey to the telesterion, the great inner hall, was itself a transformation. Fasting stripped away the weight of daily life. Torchlit processions blurred the line between waking and dream. The Kikian, a sacred drink, was shared among the initiates, its purpose shrouded in secrecy but said to prepare the mind for vision. By the time you entered the sanctuary, you were no longer just yourself. You were an initiate standing at the threshold of a mystery. What took place inside was never recorded. Silence was the first law of Eleusis, but those who emerged spoke of it as an encounter with divine truth, a union of sensuality and sanctity that proved the two could merge without conflict. In the East, this merging was embraced openly. Tantra, a complex and often misunderstood tradition interwoven with Hinduism and Buddhism, carried at its core a radical truth. The body and spirit are not separate worlds. To reach the divine, you do not flee the senses. You honor them, refine them, make them your allies. Within Tantra, even the simplest acts, breathing, eating, moving, could become acts of worship. Among its most intricate and debated expressions were the sexual rites, encounters designed not for indulgence but for awakening. Every gesture, every breath, every glance carried symbolic weight. The man embodied Shiva, stillness, pure awareness. The woman embodied Shakti, movement, creation, life itself. Their union was not simply physical, it was a reenactment of the cosmic dance between chaos and order, matter and spirit. Contrary to popular belief, most tantric practices had nothing to do with sex at all. Chanting, meditation, and visualization formed the foundation. But when sexual rites were present, they were shrouded in layers of symbolism, each action a step toward transcendence. In the carvings of temples at Khajuraho and Konark, lovers are locked in eternal embrace, not to scandalize, but to declare, the path to the sacred runs through the senses. Desire, when approached with wisdom and reverence, could be the spark that lights the way to the divine. Long before these traditions took shape, in the world's first cities, sacred sexuality was already part of spiritual life. In Sumer's great city of Uruk, the goddess Inanna, later known as Ishtar, ruled as the embodiment of love, fertility, and power. Her priestesses, the Hierodoles, were not ordinary women. They were consecrated servants of the goddess, trained in music, dance, poetry, and the arts of love. Their bodies were seen as vessels for divine energy, their role woven into the fabric of cosmic balance. The most important rite was the sacred marriage. Each new year, the king took the role of Dumuzi, Inanna's divine lover, while the high priestess became the goddess herself. This was no staged performance. It was the spiritual heartbeat of the city. The union, whether physical or symbolic, was believed to bless the crops, renew the king's mandate to rule, and align the city with the order of the heavens. But sacred union in Sumer was not confined to this single festival. Throughout the year, those who sought divine favor, healing, or fertility might turn to the temple. There, under the protection of its walls, union with a priestess was considered an offering to the goddess, a rite of purification and renewal. For some women, this role meant prestige and safety. For others, particularly those at the edges of temple life, it carried risk and vulnerability. From the torchlit processions of Eleusis to the carved stone lovers of India, from the ziggurats of Uruk to the whispered hymns of Inanna's priestesses, the thread is unbroken. Across time and culture, humanity has returned to the same truth, that the sacred is not found in denying the body, but in recognizing it as a bridge to the divine. Those who dared to walk that bridge, whether in silence, in ritual embrace, or in song, left behind a legacy that still stirs the human spirit, even now. You walk with me now through a doorway in time, into an age when the body was not an enemy but a bridge to the sacred. In ancient Sumer, they believed the human form could channel the divine as naturally as river water nourishing fertile soil. In the chambers of Inanna, love was not just a feeling, it was a rite, a ceremony that bound heaven and earth. Far from the temples of the Near East or the meditative halls of India, the Celts celebrated fertility in their own wild, unrestrained way. Their great festival was Beltane, a firelit threshold between spring and summer when the boundaries between the human and the unseen grew thin. This was no quiet ritual. Flames roared on the hills, sending sparks into the dark, each one a blessing for the season to come. Men and women leapt through the smoke for luck. Herds were guided between twin fires so the breath of the flames might guard them from sickness. And when the last embers faded, a deeper mystery began. Young men and women disappeared into the greenwood for what they called greenwood marriages, temporary unions born of the season, often sealed under the canopy of stars. This wasn't scandal, it was considered sacred, a living reflection of the Earth Mother joining with the horned god. Even some married couples took part, setting aside vows for a single night to honor renewal and the cycles of nature. Children conceived beneath Beltane's fires were called children of the flame, believed to be blessed with strength and a spark of magic in their blood. There were no temples here. The forest was the altar, the fire the witness, the night sky the cathedral. But with the rise of Christianity, the tone shifted. The festivals, once seen as channels of blessing, were rebranded as temptation. The body was recast from vessel of divine energy into something to discipline and deny. Still, change came slowly. Early Christianity was not yet the vast institution it would become. It lived in the margins, among mystics, ascetics, and seekers of hidden wisdom. Some of these fringe believers, like the Gnostics, whispered truths that echoed the old ways. They saw the physical world as a mirror of spiritual realities, and in that mirror, the union of male and female reflected the union of heaven and earth. A few even practiced sacred rites involving physical union, not for indulgence but for awakening, believing that enlightenment demanded one taste of all experiences without fear or shame. One mysterious sect, the Carpocratians, was rumored to walk this path openly, refusing to label any act unclean if it was done with understanding. These teachings unsettled the rising orthodoxy. Their writings were hunted down and burned, their gospels excluded from the official canon. Yet symbols endured, folded quietly into art, hidden in church carvings, or buried in stories that only a careful ear could hear. By the Middle Ages, sacred sexuality had been pushed underground. Temples became churches, priestesses became outcasts, and festivals like Beltane were outlawed or reshaped beyond recognition. But the old longing could not be erased. It appeared in the poetry of mystics, in visions described by saints, in the trembling language of union and rapture that blurred the line between prayer and passion. Hildegard of Bingen wrote of divine ecstasy as if her soul had been embraced by fire. Others spoke of God as a lover, of the soul as a bride. The forms changed, but the current never stopped flowing. What began in the torchlit paths of Eleusis, in the shadowed chambers of Inanna, in the starlit forests of the Celts, lived on, hidden but alive. For though laws may forbid and temples may fall, the The human desire to unite the body and spirit in something greater is older than any empire and more enduring than any creed. And now, as we drift from the forests and fields into the marble streets of Athens, the mood shifts. Here, reason and rhetoric ruled, or so it seemed. But even in this city of logic, passions still ran deep. In 399 BC, a man named Socrates would discover just how dangerous it was to live and speak without bending to the will of power. Not with the sword, not with exile, but with a simple cup of poison, the city would silence one of its most restless voices. And his crime? Not corruption as they claimed, but the audacity to make people think. You stand in the shadows of Athens, watching a man walk toward his death as though he were stepping into an afternoon conversation. Socrates, the thorn in the side of the city's powerful, had been given every chance to bend, to save himself with a few words of compromise. He could have chosen exile, paid a fine, even allowed himself to fade into quiet obscurity. But that wasn't in his nature. Instead, with a stubborn humor that only deepened the sting, he suggested the court reward him for his service to Athens. The room did not laugh. The verdict was death, administered not by blade or chain, but by a cup of hemlock, a poison as silent as it was certain. On his final morning, he was calm, even cheerful. He bathed, spoke tenderly to his children, and met his friends not with fear, but with the ease of a man stepping into the next chapter. As the cold numbness crept up his legs, he spoke of the soul's immortality, treating death not as an enemy but as a doorway. His friends wept, but Socrates would not give them the performance of despair. He could have fled, plans were in place. Yet he stayed, believing that to break the law, even an unjust one, would wound the city more than his own death ever could. And so Athens silenced its greatest questioner, not with spectacle, but with a quiet cup. They thought they were ending him. Instead, they etched his name into eternity. From the marble courts of Athens, the story drifts to the golden halls of Alexandria, where another ruler mastered the art of deciding life and death, not with philosophy, but with poison. Cleopatra, forever remembered as the queen draped in silk and shadow, was more than a political seductress. She was a student of science, a mistress of toxicology. In her private chambers, alongside scrolls of astronomy and medicine, she kept vials of substances that could kill, cure, or deceive. She tested them, too, observing which venoms worked swiftly, which stole life slowly, and which left no visible trace. To Cleopatra, poison was not cruelty for its own sake, it was strategy. A drop could do what an army could not, end a life quietly without stirring the city into revolt. She studied hemlock, nightshade, strychnine, and deadly blends of snake venom and herbs. Some induced hallucinations, others mimicked natural illness, and a few ended life so gently they could pass for mercy. And when her own hour came, when Octavian claimed Egypt and prepared to parade her as a living trophy, she would not allow herself to be caged. Whether it was the legendary ASP pressed to her skin or a hidden toxin slipped into her body by more discreet means, Cleopatra ensured that her death was her choice. To her, poison was more than a weapon. It was control, the final act of a queen who refused to be conquered in spirit. Rome understood that lesson well. In the sprawling palaces of the Caesars, poison became the tool of the sophisticated killer. Why wage a bloody coup when you could serve an enemy their last meal with a smile? No screaming crowds, no civil unrest, just a toast, a sip, and a sudden vacancy in the halls of power. In the 1st century CE, under Emperor Claudius, poison found its golden age in the hands of one extraordinary woman, Locusta, Rome's most notorious professional poisoner. She was no back-alley apothecary. She was a specialist, a kind of chemist whose clients were among the most powerful in the empire. When Agrippina the Younger wanted her son Nero on the throne, she turned to Locusta. Claudius's beloved mushrooms were laced, and the emperor's reign ended with a meal. Nero, once in power, kept her close. When his stepbrother Britannicus threatened his rule, it was Locusta's hand that delivered the fatal dose at a banquet. The young prince collapsed before the guests could even rise from their seats. Nero rewarded her not just with pardon, but with land, wealth, and pupils. turning her deadly art into a kind of imperial school. In Rome, the sword might kill your body, but poison could kill your reputation, your alliances, even the memory of you. A stabbing left witnesses. A poisoned cup left only whispers. And whispers could be shaped, redirected, and used as weapons themselves. In every age, those who mastered poison understood something about human nature, that fear of the unseen is often greater than fear of the visible. You can defend against a blade you see, but a hand holding a cup? That's far harder to refuse. You walk with me now into a world where power was measured not just in armies and gold, but in the invisible drop that could turn a feast into a funeral. In Rome, poison became a second language, one spoken in glances over goblets, in the way a servant poured wine, in the lingering scent of herbs on the rim of a cup. Suspicion was a constant guest at every table. Even slaves, the hands trusted to prepare food, became objects of doubt. To fight this unseen enemy, Rome turned dining into a kind of theater of defense. Silver spoons were believed to darken in the presence of toxins. Antidotes were crafted from ground emeralds, exotic roots, and even the flesh of vipers. Physicians and philosophers searched for the mythical universal cure, a potion of dozens of ingredients meant to banish any venom from the body. Yet no charm, no concoction, could truly stop the steady, whispering tide of deaths. Poison was too quiet, too subtle. It moved through the empire like a rumor, untraceable, undeniable, and feared more than any blade. Travel farther east, and you find yourself in the palaces of ancient China, where poison was elevated to an art form. In the glittering courts of the Han, Tang, and Ming dynasties, it was a weapon that arrived in silk sleeves and porcelain teacups. Here, healing and harm shared the same apothecary shelves. A single extra pinch of a medicinal herb could transform a cure into a killer. Court physicians and alchemists lived in that delicate space, their hands capable of saving a life one day and ending one the next. In this dangerous ballet, the most skilled players were often women. Imperial consorts and concubines forbidden to wield swords or hold official titles. They learned to remove rivals with elegance and precision, leaving no open wound, no scandal, only an unexplained decline. The Empress Dowager might never raise her voice, yet her will could find its way into the veins of an enemy. History still whispers of Empress Lu of the Han Dynasty, who secured her throne by quietly erasing her rivals, her rule cemented in both awe and dread. Beyond the palace walls, secret societies carried their own arsenal of toxins. The infamous Five Poison sect was said to coat blades with deadly herbs or slip tinctures into ceremonial wine. Poison here was not only a weapon but a message: I can reach you anywhere. This fear bred an advanced culture of defense. Imperial kitchens became laboratories. Silver chopsticks were believed to react against arsenic. Meals were tested before they ever reached an emperor's lips. In China, poison wasn't reckless, it was ritual. A single drop was a chess move, calculated and deliberate. In the royal courts of ancient India, the weapon sometimes wore a human face. Legends speak of the Vishakanya, poison maidens. These were said to be young girls chosen in childhood, slowly fed microdoses of toxins until their bodies became immune, but also lethal. Their sweat, breath, even a kiss was believed to carry death. Intimacy, in their presence, was not love, it was execution. The tale traces back to the strategist Chanakya, advisor to Chandragupta Maurya in the 4th century BC. In his vision of statecraft, a beautiful assassin could be more effective than an army. Political texts describe how such women might be used to seduce and eliminate enemies without raising a single weapon. Whether this was literal or symbolic remains debated. Some historians believe the Vishakanya were metaphor, a living warning about the dangers of seduction and trust in politics. Others argue that the practice may have existed in some form, rooted in the ancient medicinal concept of gradual poisoning, known in Ayurveda as Vishakrama. Real or legend, the fear was tangible. Foreign envoys were warned, food was inspected, and a stranger's smile could cause more unease than a soldier's sword. In India, poison didn't always come in a cup. It could arrive wearing jewels, dancing in the glow of lantern light, and offering a hand to lead you to your doom. And then, in Judea under Roman authority, you find a ruler who lived in a constant storm of suspicion, Herod the Great. Known for his towering architecture and ruthless politics, he trusted no one. His reign was a fortress built on paranoia, and in his court, poison became the liquid embodiment of that fear. To Herod, a public execution sent one message, but a private, quiet death sent another. No one was beyond his reach. You step now into the shadowed corridors of ancient palaces, where trust was rare and danger often came from the hand that once held yours. Few rulers embodied this truth more than Herod the Great. To the world, he was a master builder, a king who raised fortresses and temples that seemed to defy time itself. But within the walls of his court, fear was the true foundation of his reign. Herod's suspicion grew like ivy, creeping into every relationship, even those bound by blood. Miriam, the Hasmonean princess who had once been the love of his life, became a victim of that creeping doubt. Convinced, without proof, that she plotted against him, Herod ordered her death. The blow did not stop there. Her mother, her grandfather, and in time, her sons followed. Those boys, beloved by the people and blessed with noble lineage, could have been a rallying point for a future rebellion. In Herod's mind, that made them not heirs, but threats. According to ancient accounts, they met their end not with a blade, but with a quiet cup laced in secrecy. Roman justice, he called it, though it served only his own security. In this way, poison became Herod's scalpel, carving away dissent without the spectacle of public execution. Ministers, servants, and relatives disappeared behind a curtain of sudden illness. Sometimes a drug was used to loosen tongues in interrogation. Other times, it silenced them forever. To the outside world, it was divine wrath or bad air. Inside the palace, it was simply policy. It was efficiency without outrage, a ruler's whispered warning that no bond, no bloodline, could shield you from his will. Herod's obsession with control reached its darkest point in his final days. Afflicted by disease and a mind unraveling under paranoia, he feared his own death would pass without grief. His solution was as chilling as it was telling. He ordered that prominent Jewish leaders be executed upon his death, ensuring the nation would mourn even if not for him. That command, mercifully, was never carried out. Yet by then, his court had long been drenched in the quiet terror of suspicion, a poison that outlived the man himself. Travel east, and you find yourself in the ceremonial splendor of the Achaemenid Empire, where kings like Darius and Xerxes ruled lands stretching from the Aegean to the Industry. These courts dazzled visitors with gold and precision, but beneath the rituals and pageantry lay the same silent weapon. Poison here was not crude, it was refined. It existed in the pause before a servant tasted the king's wine, in the locked kitchens guarded as tightly as the treasury. Greek historians, prone to drama but not without kernels of truth, tell of assassination plots that bloomed behind embroidered curtains. One figure rises from these accounts, Bagoas, a eunuch whose influence under Artaxerxes III was vast and lethal. He is said to have orchestrated the poisoning of enemies, the king himself, and even a puppet ruler he installed when that puppet grew a mind of his own. Bagoas ruled not through legions but through vials. In Persia, knowledge of plants and minerals was advanced. The same skill that could cure fever could mimic it. A slow poison could let a man finish a feast before collapsing. A swift one could snuff him out before the goblet left his lips. In a world where power depended on appearances, poison was the perfect tool. Public execution risked scandal. Private death kept the empire's image intact. A man could go to bed convinced of his own triumph and never wake to see its unraveling. Even Alexander the Great's sudden death in Babylon was whispered to have Persian origins, a drink laced with the secrets of Eastern apothecaries. True or not, the suspicion alone shows the fear such knowledge commanded. And still, beyond palaces and empires, the threads of poison's history weave into the sacred texts of the ancient Near East. The Bible itself contains unsettling glimpses of its place in law and ritual. One of the most haunting comes from the Book of Numbers, where a husband suspecting his wife of betrayal could bring her before a priest. There, holy water mixed with dust from the temple floor would be given to her to drink. This ordeal of bitter water was not meant to kill outright, but to provoke a divine verdict. If she was guilty, her body would show it. If innocent, she would remain unharmed. Elsewhere in Scripture, poison appears as both physical threat and spiritual metaphor. Deuteronomy warns that turning to false gods will bring curses of bitter gall and wormwood, plants known for their dangerous properties. In Job, poison is likened to the slow spread of injustice. In the Psalms, the tongues of the wicked are said to drip with venom. These words, whether literal or symbolic, remind us that the ancients understood poison not only as a substance, but as a force, silent, invisible, and transformative. From Herod's marble halls to the gold-clad courts of Persia, from ritual trials in Israel to whispered rumors in Babylon, poison was never just about death. It was about power, about control, about the unnerving truth that sometimes the most dangerous weapon is the one you never see. You move now into a chapter of history where silence was deadlier than swords and the most dangerous blow was struck without ever lifting a weapon. Across the empires of the ancient world, poison was more than a method, it was a philosophy. It didn't require armies or banners, it left no battlefield for witnesses to study, and it rarely announced itself. It crept into chambers, banquet halls, and temples, settling disputes before they could ignite into open war. In an age when the clash of steel was seen as honorable, poison carried a different weight. To die in battle was to face an enemy who acknowledged your strength. To die from a drink poured by your own cupbearer meant that someone within arm's reach had made a choice. It was betrayal distilled, a weapon wrapped in trust. Every bite became a question, every sip a test. Philosophers pondered its meaning, likening it to fate or divine justice disguised in kindness. Religious texts invoked it as judgment from the heavens. Kings and queens embraced it as a way to keep their courts polished and peaceful on the surface, even as they quietly altered the flow of succession beneath. It was both cowardly and cunning, unseen, yet impossible to forget. Poison didn't just claim lives. It eroded trust, reshaped dynasties, and stained legacies for centuries. Even now, its legends cling to the corners of history. Socrates' hemlock, Cleopatra's serpent, Claudius's figs, the Vishakanyas of India. These were more than deaths. They became cautionary tales, lessons on the cost of power and the fragility of loyalty. In the theater of politics, the most dangerous players were often those who never set foot on the stage. Poison had no face, no armor, no voice, yet it ruled as the perfect assassin. But power and protection weren't always measured in death. In another cradle of civilization, along the steady flow of the Nile, the Egyptians shaped a different kind of safeguard, one meant not to end life, but to guard it. Here, in the shadow of temples and pyramids, the concept of security took on a mechanical form, the earliest known pin tumbler lock, born around 2000 BC. It was made entirely of wood, simple to the eye yet brilliant in design. A horizontal bolt slid into place to secure a door, drilled with vertical holes. Pins would drop into those holes like tiny sentinels, holding the bolt fast. The key, carved with matching pegs, lifted the pins just enough for the bolt to glide free. It was a quiet triumph of engineering. No brute force, no chisels, only precision and balance. For the Egyptians who saw the world through the lens of Ma'at, order over chaos, this wasn't just a device, it was a statement. Locks controlled who could enter sacred spaces, who could touch the treasures of pharaohs, who could disturb the stillness of a tomb. In death as in life, boundaries were sacred. Keys themselves became symbols of authority. To hold one was to be trusted. Remarkably, the logic behind that wooden lock still lives on in the metal mechanisms of today. Pins dropping into place, lifted into alignment by a key, it is a 4,000-year-old idea barely altered by time. And like so many ideas born in the fertile lands of the Nile, it traveled. The design moved outward, finding its way into Greek and Roman hands, and from there across the ancient world. Yet before the age of tumblers and bolts, another form of security reigned in the cities of Mesopotamia. In Babylon and Nineveh, protection came not from hidden pins, but from symbols, personal seals that declared ownership, authority, and identity. The cylinder seal was a marvel in miniature, a small carved stone, often worn on a cord or bracelet, its surface etched with intricate images, gods, animals, or lines of cuneiform. To use it, one would roll it across wet clay, leaving behind a unique impression. That mark was both a signature and a barrier. An unbroken seal meant that what lay behind it was untouched. To break it without permission was to invite suspicion, punishment, or worse. In a way, these seals were the silent ancestors of the modern signature, and like the locks of Egypt, they carried more than practicality. They were tokens of trust in a world where trust was fragile. From the invisible threat of poison to the tangible promise of locks and seals, the ancient world reminds you that control was never just about strength, it was about subtlety. Whether through a drop in a cup or a carved mark on clay, the game was always the same, deciding who holds the key and who never will. You run your hand over a small carved cylinder, cool and smooth, its surface alive with tiny figures, lions, gods, and curling lines of script. In the ancient cities of Mesopotamia, this was not decoration. It was identity. It was power. Pressed into wet clay, the cylinder rolled out a repeating pattern, like an ancient barcode, sealing a jar, a doorway, or a coffer. If the clay was unbroken, all was as it should be. But if the seal lay cracked, the message was clear: someone had trespassed. To break a seal was not just to open a container, it was to challenge the authority of the one who placed it. In temples, priests used their personal sigils to lock sacred storerooms. Merchants sealed contracts in clay. Even kings relied on these tiny cylinders to secure their correspondence. Entire economies rested on their impressions. Lose your seal, and you lost more than a tool. You lost your name, your authority, your right to be believed. In a way, it was the ancient world's version of two-step security, but instead of a password, you carried your reputation around your neck. While the people of Mesopotamia mastered the art of sealing, Egypt had already given the world its first true mechanical lock. The Greeks, inheriting and reshaping ideas from their neighbors, took this craft in a new direction. In their growing cities, crowded with merchants, philosophers, and intrigue, security became a personal affair. Wealthy citizens, priests, and temple keepers began to demand locks that were smaller, sturdier, and more intricate. Greek locks often combined wood with metal parts, a step forward from Egypt's fully wooden designs. Their most common type was the bolt lock, simple yet effective, a sliding bar fitted into the doorframe, secured with a pin or peg. To release it, one needed a key, not the pocket-sized kind we know today, but long L-shaped rods, sometimes as long as a forearm, forged from bronze or iron. These keys were slid into vertical openings and used to lift the internal pins, freeing the bolt. Carrying a key was more than convenience, it was a declaration. To hold one was to say, "This is mine. This space answers to me." Temples locked away their offerings. Wealthy Athenians secured chests of coin and jewelry. Public archives and storerooms were shut to all but the authorized. In Athens especially, a locked door meant privacy, property, and autonomy. Locksmiths were not mere craftsmen, they were guardians of trust, artisans who shaped the line between public and private. Then came the Romans, whose genius lay not in inventing from nothing, but in perfecting everything they touched. By the height of their empire, locks were no longer rare, they were everywhere. Shops, homes, temples, all secured with devices built to last. Bronze and iron replaced wood, and the mechanisms became smaller, more precise, and far more difficult to tamper with. The most common was the warded lock, in which fixed barriers inside the lock blocked any key that didn't have the right notches. This innovation gave rise to the skeleton key, a stripped-down tool that could bypass simpler wards, a favorite among both clever servants and less honest intruders. But the Romans didn't stop there. They created puzzle locks for chests and boxes, devices so intricate they could require multiple actions or even mislead thieves with false keyholes. These were the safes of the ancient world. Even the keys themselves became a statement. Roman citizens often wore them as rings, a blend of jewelry and utility. A key on the finger told the world that you owned something worth protecting. Yet in a more sobering use, some locks were affixed to slave collars, engraved with messages urging their return if found. It was a reminder that in Rome, security served both wealth and control, often in the same breath. From Mesopotamia's seals to Egypt's wooden bolts, from Greek metal pins to Rome's intricate wards, the story of locks is the story of civilization learning how to say, "This is mine, and you may not touch it." It is a story not just of mechanics, but of meaning. Because whether carved in stone, turned in bronze, or pressed into clay, every lock and seal whispered the same truth. The real treasure was never just the gold behind the door, it was the trust that the door would hold. You walk through the marble streets of ancient Rome, and the glint of a small bronze key catches your eye, not dangling from a merchant's belt, but fixed to the collar of a slave. These locks weren't guarding treasure, they were enforcing ownership. It's a cold truth, but one that reminds us that in Rome, security wasn't just about gold or jewels, it was about control. Every key was crafted for a single lock, holding not only possessions, but letters, heirlooms, recipes, and sometimes secrets whispered only in shadowed rooms. While the Mediterranean world perfected its wards and bolts, far to the east, another kind of mastery was taking shape. In ancient China, the art of lockmaking became something more than utility. It was balance, elegance, and even a touch of spiritual harmony. By the Zhou dynasty, around 100 BC, Chinese craftsmen were shaping all-metal locks from bronze and, later, iron. Unlike the large, obvious mechanisms of Greece or Egypt, these were compact and discreet, hidden within cabinets, chests, or gates. The most iconic was the suo, the Chinese padlock, barrel-shaped, rectangular, and often decorated with the forms of dragons, tigers, or turtles. A tiger-shaped lock didn't just keep out thieves, it called upon a guardian spirit, warning danger away. Inside, a pin tumbler system, akin to the principle the Egyptians had discovered centuries earlier, lay miniaturized and perfected. To turn the right key was to align a hidden world of springs and pins, to release the bolt like the lifting of a spell. Some were trick locks, designed to outwit the impatient, requiring subtle angles or multiple moves to open. In this way, security became a matter of intellect as much as ownership. Along the Silk Road, these designs traveled like whispers, influencing the craft of locks across continents. In India, security took on its own unique and almost mystical form. By the Maurya period, around 300 BC, metal locks were guarding temple gates, treasury doors, and royal archives. Yet Indian ingenuity went beyond the mechanical. Imagine a carved wooden panel in a temple wall, ordinary to the untrained eye, yet with a single press on a lotus petal, the surface shifts and a hidden compartment appears. Secret trigger locks concealed within architecture, false drawers, double doors. These were puzzles wrapped in devotion. Some mechanisms are so precise that even modern restorers study them in awe. The Arthashastra, a political treatise from this era, spoke not only of guarding wealth, but of guarding knowledge. A lock was more than a barrier, it was part of a ritual cycle. Gates were opened only on auspicious days, their mechanisms adorned with serpents, lotuses, or sacred geometry. In Indian thought, protection didn't always mean confrontation. It meant redirection, an intruder never even realizing the treasure was there. Far in the misty north, among the Celtic peoples of Iron Age Britain and Gaul, locks were more rugged, forged in a land of rain, wind, and shifting alliances. Their homes and granaries were secured with heavy wooden bars, sliding bolts, and iron door rings. Archaeologists have unearthed early iron padlocks and warded locks here, their design echoing Roman influence, likely brought through trade or conquest. But for the Celts, not all guardianship was mechanical. Over the threshold of a home, you might see a triskele carved into the wood, or an amulet hung from the lintel. These weren't meant for human thieves, they were charms to turn away spirits, fairies, or whatever unseen forces wandered the night. To them, a locked door was one line of defense, a blessing carved into its frame was another. From Rome's keys of authority to China's animal-guarded padlocks, from India's secret panels to Celtic charms, each culture wove security into its own worldview. And as you drift deeper into the quiet of history, you can almost hear the message they all shared, that what we choose to protect is never only about what we own, it's about what we fear to lose, and the lengths we'll go to keep it safe. You stand on the deck of a Viking longship, the sea mist on your face, and there, fastened to a weather-worn chest, rests an iron padlock, blackened by salt and storms. For the Norse, a lock was more than protection, it was a promise. Keys were not hidden in pockets, they were worn, carried, displayed. A key carved like a serpent, shaped like an axe, or fashioned into a miniature hammer of Thor wasn't only a tool, it was a mark of authority, a silent declaration that you commanded and you guarded. In Viking households, the woman of the home often carried the keys. They dangled from her belt like a badge of honor, each one a statement of trust. Archaeologists have unearthed these key rings from graves, still clasped to the waist of women laid to rest centuries ago. To hold the keys was to hold the heart of the household, food, goods, treasures, and the stories worth locking away. Even in myth, the Norse gods wove locks into their magic. Certain runes could seal doors, and ancient chants claimed the power to bind or release destiny itself, as if the very act of unlocking mirrored the freeing of fate. When the Western Roman Empire faded into memory, the Byzantine Empire rose, carrying the legacy of Roman engineering into a new age. But Byzantium did not simply imitate, it refined. Their locks merged Roman mechanics with Eastern elegance, turning everyday security into miniature works of art. Padlocks shaped like doves, lions, or intricate crosses, forged in bronze and iron, guarded treasures and sacred spaces alike. Advanced ward systems demanded precisely cut keys, and many locks featured rotating bolts, spring-loaded catches, and decoy keyholes, traps for the overconfident intruder. The tradition of keys as symbols endured here too. Bishops, abbots, and high officials carried ceremonial keys, often larger than needed, as visible proof of their sacred authority to open churches, archives, and treasuries. These keys didn't just grant access, they carried the weight of divine permission. And then, further east, during the golden centuries of the Islamic caliphates, the science of lockmaking blossomed into something both artistic and ingenious. Drawing on the wisdom of Persia, India, Greece, and Rome, craftsmen in the Abbasid era produced locks of breathtaking intricacy. Some held 4 or 5 levers inside, others combined multiple tumblers with hidden triggers. Early combination mechanisms emerged, requiring not just a key, but a sequence of actions to open. Padlocks shaped like fish, birds, or lions gleamed in brass, their surfaces etched with flowing Arabic inscriptions, praises to God, the name of the owner, or blessings for protection. These designs carried both beauty and authority. And in the world of invention, one figure stands out, Al-Jazari, a mind centuries ahead of his time. He documented an astonishing range of mechanical devices, from water clocks to automated locks, blending creativity with precision engineering in ways that still influence the craft today. In the bustling markets of Baghdad, these locks kept merchants' chests secure. In palaces, they guarded relics and private chambers. In libraries, they protected precious manuscripts from both theft and unworthy hands. In that age, a finely made lock was more than protection. It was a statement of order, faith, and human mastery over chaos. By the close of antiquity, locks had become more than mechanical devices. They were emblems of civilization, silent arbiters deciding who could step inside and who must remain outside. From Egypt's wooden pin tumblers to Byzantium's puzzle locks, from the tiger-shaped guardians of China to the intricate mechanisms of the Islamic Golden Age, each culture added its own chapter to this shared story. To hold a key was to wield authority. It meant you could open the granary or seal the temple, reveal a hidden letter, or guard a family's inheritance. Locks began to speak without words. False keyholes, hidden compartments, sacred inscriptions, all whispers of the same truth. I am valuable. I am protected. I hold something you will never touch without my consent. And as much as they kept danger out, they shaped human behavior within. In societies that thrived on hierarchy, locks defined boundaries. In places of trade and diversity, they built trust or suspicion. In the spiritual realm, they safeguarded what was considered pure from the hands of the unready. Yet there was always the other side of the coin. The lockpickers, the craftsmen of intrusion, the minds that rose to meet the challenge of every new barrier. And so, history reminds us, the story of the lock is also the story of the one who seeks to open it. You can almost hear it, the faint click of metal on metal, the satisfying shift of a bolt sliding free. That sound has followed humanity for thousands of years, from the shadowed corners of Mesopotamian grain vaults to the polished counters of Roman merchant stalls. And for just as long as locks have existed, so too have the minds determined to open them without permission. The cat-and-mouse game we know today, security versus intrusion, was not born in the modern world. It began the moment the first door was barred, the first chest sealed, and someone somewhere whispered, "I wonder if I can open it." But ancient locks tell a story far deeper than mechanics. They are mirrors reflecting something intimate about us, our craving for safety, our instinctive caution, and our belief that some things are meant to be guarded, not shared freely. Each lock was both shield and statement, a physical line drawn between yours and mine. It wasn't just about stopping hands, it was about defining boundaries for hearts, homes, and legacies. When you imagine those ancient vaults and chambers, don't just picture the objects they guarded, think of the emotions tied to them. Relief when the key turned. Dread when the seal was found broken. Pride when a door stayed secure. Locks carried weight not because they were made of bronze or iron, but because of the promises and power they represented. In marketplaces, a locked chest told the wandering eye that the goods within were not for idle inspection. In temples, a barred door whispered that what lay beyond was sacred, not for the uninitiated. In private homes, a lock was an unspoken message. This is my space. You may enter only if I allow it. The very presence of a lock, even before it was tested, worked on the human mind. It created a sense of threshold, a pause before crossing, an awareness that what lay inside mattered. That's why, even in their simplest form, locks became part of human psychology. They fed our awareness of ownership, our understanding of trust, and our strategies for survival. And as civilizations advanced, the complexity of locks often matched the complexity of the societies themselves. Where laws and hierarchies grew, so too did mechanisms to enforce them, sometimes with beauty, sometimes with cold efficiency. Yet, no matter the time or place, every locked door carried the same quiet power. It didn't need to shout or threaten. It simply stood in place and declared, "This is important. This is claimed. And if you wish to pass, you must prove yourself worthy." Even now, centuries later, the symbolism hasn't changed. We may use digital codes and biometric scans instead of carved keys and iron bolts, but the heart of the matter is the same. Locks, whether ancient or modern, are not just about keeping things out. They are about protecting what gives our lives meaning. And maybe, just maybe, about reminding the world that some treasures are not meant for everyone's hands.